Judge Lichtcblau and Judge Evangelista, you both hired consultants. Did you also hire one, Judge Flores?
Yes, I did. I had a consultant, professional consultant. I also my legal assistant, who I'll forever be grateful for, became my campaign manager. And after signing a check over to campaign consultant, I realized that those are two separate people. So your campaign manager.
Could you explain that? Explain the different
Sure.
roles.
Sure, absolutely. I hired a consultant who had a consulting firm, and there were other people that worked there. And he told me very early on, I'm not going to be your day-to-day person. I'm going to be maybe higher level messaging and putting you in contact with different people. I'll always be there for you, but day-to-day, my staff person will answer questions and that kind of thing. So I quickly, learned that staff person, who's great and is a professional in her own right, just simply did not have the bandwidth to deal with the type of workload that I wanted to bring to the campaign. And it was going to be someone else that I needed to bring from the outside. And I was lucky to have my legal assistant willing to take on that job as my law firm was essentially winding down. But that was a separate paycheck, well worth it. But it was definitely an additional cost that went into the campaign. Someone that would coordinate volunteers, someone that would follow up with people as to where events were going to be, as to what time I was scheduled to speak at an event, as to whether there's something was relocated, all the day-to-day, which brings up another thing that we could talk about later on. I just want to mention it once, just health. Your health is its own obstacle in a campaign. You're meeting a lot of people. Things may be different now after COVID-19, but at the time you're shaking a lot of hands, you're meeting a lot of people, and you're not getting a lot of sleep. And it wears on you. I got physically exhausted twice during the 9 months of campaign, where one day I said, I'm just not getting out of bed. Like, I feel like I can't. And that's a lot. For me, that's a lot. But it happened once every, about 90 days. And then the campaign was over. But it did take a toll in that aspect as well.
Well, let's talk more about that. So the first challenge we talked about was fundraising. And here's another really big challenge, is maintaining your own health and your own focus and your own balance. Maybe you have a family that you're concerned about. Maybe you have a job and an income that you need. So how do you deal with those stresses? How do you overcome them? Who wants to start with that one? Well, Judge Flores already got us kicked off. Judge Lichtcblau, Judge Evangelista?
Sure. So I think all of us had kids while we were campaigning. We had, I don't know, I think my boys were probably something like 12 and 9 or something during that time period. And I think it was probably similar, I think, for you, Judge Flores. I'm not sure if you similar kids that age, but anyway, so you have your family, and it can be extremely trying. It really can. And of course, I would try and drag them everywhere with me, and they would, not as enthusiastic as I had otherwise hoped. But you can also use the connections that you have through your children and their friends parents to help you out. And so that was something that I was. You find these volunteers in just the most wonderful and unexpected places, and you realize that there are people who are so willing to go to great lengths to help you. And I don't know where that love and that sense of just sure, I'll pitch in comes from, but for me personally, I drew a lot of strength from that. It was really exhausting. I remember losing weight when I was campaigning, just because you're going, and you're constantly thinking about it. It's like you go to sleep, you're thinking about it. You wake up in the middle of the night, you're thinking about it. You get up in the morning, you're thinking about it. If you're still working, as I was, and certainly I was a government employee, you can't be campaigning during your work time, and you can't use anything, any computer or anything, even to check email if it's campaign related. So every break you have at lunch or whatever, you're running out into the parking lot with your cell phone calling people. It's exhausting nonstop. And you do need to watch yourself to make sure that you're okay. I was fortunate enough to have to have my husband, who was serving as the treasurer and kind of CEO. He wouldn't describe himself as a campaign manager because he was off doing a bunch of other stuff, but he was really there helping me, frankly, manage the household, and also just providing me with a lot of support. I could not have done this without him. I mean, you really benefit from having family and friends who can assist you, because it is exhausting. It really is.
I would say, I would analogize it to being in a really serious trial, like being in a life case kind of a trial, maybe one that lasts 3 months, 4 months. It felt a lot like that. It felt similar. I actually enjoyed campaigning. I know Judge Flores, everywhere I went and introduced myself, people were like, "Oh, do you know Judge Flores?" He had been there and he was such a role model, and he had built that community, that sense of community, coalition building that he did that was so great. And for me, that was really energizing. And so I didn't see the campaign as work. I kind of saw it as a privilege for me. Given my background, given how my dad had come here as a farm worker, and, so I found a lot of joy, even in the hardest of works and the hardest of days and the most exhausted. I found a lot of joy in that. And, I'm proud of the way that I ran the campaign, because I let myself enjoy it. Just like even in doing a trial, like you can enjoy the trial or you can fight it and say, man, this is hard, and I just let myself enjoy the process. And I think people felt that, but again, for me, it goes back to the fundraising. That was the painful part for me. Not the physical, is the financial. Is where is this going to come from? But again, we're resourceful people. We went to law school, we passed the bar. Like, when we got to come up with something, we do it. And I think that's a good thing to think of going into it is am I that type of person? Am I resourceful? Are my friends going to pitch in? Is my husband going to be great with that? I mean, the first thing I did was talk to my husband. Obviously, it wasn't an individual decision to run. It was a family decision to run. And my husband's also an attorney. I said, do you want to run? Do you want to put your name in? And he was like, no, this is all you. And, he was super supportive at home. And it was a little melancholic. I wanted him to be out on the trail with me. But I also needed him at home. So it was, thankfully for me, it was just a quick, almost 90, 120 day run. I think I filed on Halloween, and then it was over by March. So it was quick. I know that for some of y'all, 9-month campaign is really long. So that was maybe a little less joy towards the end. I don't know.
I have to echo what Maria's saying about having fun.
Yeah.
My comments it's a true story in terms of feeling so exhausted at certain points, but I had a ton of fun during the campaign. That's naturally, I like going to events. As a lawyer, I went to events. I'm kind of, the person that'll go to meetings and go to events and have a good time. So that aspect of it came very naturally. I've since the campaign, I've read the book Quiet, and I think it's a book about different personalities, introvert, extrovert. It taught me a lot of things that I had never focused on before, but there is a high that you get in that campaigning aspect, and I think it's important to point out too. Maria alluded to it, but even while I was campaigning, without knowing, of course, if I would win. There was something I think that I should mention in this webinar, which is that I felt so proud to be uplifting Latinos in the community. Okay? Yeah. Just to have that privilege to be someone that people were rallying behind because they got to know me a little bit, but most importantly, in some settings, because they saw me as a Latino role model, someone who was doing something that was beyond something for me. It was something that would help the Latino community. That's a huge obligation, but it's a huge privilege that for me, it really made me happy. It brought me joy, and it gave me motivation to keep fighting.
Yep.
So I have so many things I want to ask you here, so many directions we could go. Let's talk for a minute about mentors, about the people who supported you along the way, and the people you consider mentors. Judge Lichtcblau mentioned her husband as a big support, but are there people who encouraged you, who held their hand out to you, who you knew you could rely on for that support, the emotional support, whatever support you needed to get you through this campaign, and who maybe were role models for you?
So I don't know if you're asking me, you know, when I was going through the appointment process, Jose Varela in the public defender's office, he was somebody from the get-go when I was in the county counsel's office who basically came to me and said, you know what, we want to see you in a position of leadership. We want, and I had, you know, it was really amazing to have somebody come and tell you that. And so, you know, during the appointment process, he was very supportive. And along the way, there were a lot of people who were very supportive of me, who I had worked with. And I do think that you draw strength from that. And you draw strength from people who are, like I said, willing to go the extra mile, who are willing to go out and endorse, who are willing to give you that advice that you need. So all of them, in a sense, were mentors to me, because they were just, I was able to just, as we talk about, draw on so much of that strength.
Yeah, I'm grateful for my wife, who was my rock, always is. And in terms of being supportive 100%. I will say that about 2 weeks into the campaign, she said, you know, you didn't really explain this clearly in terms of what we're getting ourselves into. But, you know, she had my back when I opened up my own practice. She had my back when I ran for judge, and I'm definitely grateful for her. In the legal community, a lot of mentors. I mentioned Judge Sandoval took a lot of time talking to me about what campaigning was like, was always available for me. Judge Loretta Georgie, another Latina who's on the San Francisco bench, was one of the first persons. She was the first judge I went to see in person. And she, you know, literally held her hands out and said, are you here to tell me what I think you're here to tell me? And that set the whole campaign from that point forward, to say it's not only like a yes, it's you're hoping that I do this. And I always knew I could count on her as well, and I still do. So I'm blessed with a lot of support, and also people that you meet. So I met politicians that happened to be campaigning at the time that I was campaigning, who at first may not know you because I wasn't a political person that way, but who see hard work, and who see that you're doing something genuine, and then draw attention to you maybe at events. You know, here's candidate Flores, he's running for judge, you know, you should listen to him, or I'm endorsing him, or something of that nature. So these opportunities just come up organically. Very grateful for all of those as well.
I just want to say that I, and Judge Flores knows this, I met him through an introduction of someone from ALMA, the Association of Latino Marin Attorneys, and he does not know the inspiration that he was to me in that meeting that we had, that lunch that we had. I walked away blown away. So he doesn't know how much of an inspiration he was, but he truly was. And I met him at the very beginning of the campaign, just listening to him talk about it, listening to that energy that he brought just really inspired me. And so it's funny because, you know, we may not know that we are providing sort of these opportunities for others, but it's great when you have other people willing to share their experiences and to give you that strength and that hope to go on, because it's such an unknown when you're running. It really is. It's the scariest thing in the world. And so to hear from other people from your community, It's just fantastic.
Thank you.
So I want to echo that sentiment because, you know, everywhere I went, everybody said, oh, do you know Danny? Because, you know, Danny had, you know, been there walking the steps before me. And here I was trying to walk in those really big, I mean, big footprints that he left behind. And, you know, made me really proud. I didn't have a mentor per se in this area because, again, there's so few Latinos, and again, my own discomfort in reaching out. I always would reach out kind of hoping, oh, let's have lunch maybe. And then if they brought it up or suggested it, then that would affirm me. But a lot in terms of being on the campaign trail mentorship, I had people come out of the woodworks in every community, not just the Latino community. I had, for whatever reason, I had people come out and reach out to me, email me and say, hey, I heard you're running. And they would offer advice and help, political and otherwise, from organizations. And they were excited that I was running. And some people were excited because I was a Latina and I would be the first Latina elected in San Francisco. But some people were just excited about my story, you know, where I came from, where my parents came from, and what that meant in these times, you know, and what my own personal story, aside from my father's story, which is really important. Sometimes I think it's even more important than my struggle that I had is his story. But then I tell them about my story and how I grew up. And then they embraced that and said, let's do it, you know? And I wouldn't be here without all those people having reached out, those texts, those calls, you know, and I guess maybe that's how grassroots catches fire. But, you know, definitely Judge Flores set a pretty high bar to reach before me. And I'm glad he did, because he broke the ice, right? Then when they saw me coming, they said, oh, let's see if she's got what Judge Flores had. So it gave me an opportunity. So thank you.
And it's so wonderful to see that this group here is really reaching out to others, to especially other Latinos, to encourage them to follow in your footsteps. And you know, you pull people along, and that's how we create that diversity. So it's very exciting. I'm gonna shift.
Anna, can I
Oh, yeah.
jump in and say one thing? So first of all, Maria's being very humble because she had her own fire going on. And I can attest to the number of people who ask me, well, you know, do you know Maria? And, you know, you should, and what's, you know, Maria this, Maria that. So that was nice to see. But, you know, we mentioned, it was brought up earlier that, you know, one of the challenges of campaigning for judge is the fact that you're not political. You can't make any promises. You can't suggest, you know, what you would do in a particular case. There's the flip side of that, however, and I think this is what underlies some of the comments that are being made here. The flip side of that is that what you have to offer is yourself, and in a very important role. And campaigning for judge is hard because it doesn't happen that often. But if you take the time to educate people about how significant it is to have the opportunity to elect a Superior Court judge that has an opportunity to touch more families' lives than most politicians will ever directly do, then what is left is something very organic, very, very natural, and very real. It is an investment into that person. Will that person, is that someone that you could trust to do their job, to make tough calls, to have courage to make tough calls, even things that may not be politically popular? So giving people the opportunity to do something like that is also something very valuable, because most people don't ever feel like they have that opportunity to do something of that significance. And it's mutual. I think people feel good about running for someone who's not trying to promise them something.
Yep.
So that, I think that hopefully will encourage people watching.